require assistance. We have to ask sometimes help from our husbands, from our children, from friends. We are always asking questions. We're involved in many activities, and we're responsible for just a host of duties. And at times we become overwhelmed and frustrated. To get everything done, we ask other people to do other things for us. And in making those requests, we have to alter our initial plans. Sometimes when we have to, something as simple as uh, asking someone to pick up the children from school. If you need help, then you have to sometimes alter what you're going to do because you got to make arrangements for where they're going to go. So, with everything that you ask someone to do, there's something you must do. You have to do something. Even when you're getting help, there are some results or some adjustments that you will have to make. And often it will result in more frustration. So it seems as if it's compounded when we ask, what is it that, when we ask for help from other people. But when our first request is made to God, that makes the difference. Our first question, our first request should be to God. We should ask his advice in the initial decision making process. Before we agree to take on a responsibility, because if you look at it, the reason that we are frustrated is because we went out before without God. And then we said, come on, God, get with me. I need you to catch up here. I'm out here and I'm overwhelmed with all of these things that I've committed to do, and I need you to catch up. But that isn't the way that we ought to handle things. We ought to ask God before we agree to do anything. And that seems like, gosh, that's just too many steps. But that's the best step. That's the best step that we can take. We can't demand that God perform for us when it's our decision that we made to take on this responsibility. We want God then to perform signs, miracles, and wonders. We know how to quote that scripture, and we know how to remind Him, oh, I'm supposed to be doing exploits. But if you're out front without God, there are no signs, wonders, and miracles. There are no exploits in His absence. There are no, there are no, we are doomed for failure when we get out there and do it without Him. There are other times, we're frustrated when people, we say, um, don't do or fulfill the task that we've asked them to. But there are times when we find ourselves in predicaments that were self-inflicted. Sometimes there are no fault of our own, but there's still frustrations. There's still pain that were caused. If Sister T hit me, my head's gonna hurt. If I hit me, my head's gonna hurt. It's still pain. It's still trouble. So whatever, whether it's outside or whether it's in, it still is going to. And I know it sounds like I'm being scatterama, but I wanted you to just get some backdrop here before we go any further, so you can see how things come about. Despite our good intentions and our faithfulness to God, we have issues and requests that we'll need assistance with. Whether we are the cause of our frustrations or if they originate outside and outside of our control. And we talked about that on the way over here with Sister Tiny and Sister Wardlaw, that we get frustrated by things that we have no control over. They're outside of our scope of practice. They're above our pay grade. And so, why are we getting frustrated by things I'm not getting paid to handle? I mean, I'm not taking on volunteer work for God. I'm not going to get anything from it. I can't do it to start with. So, I need to ask the one that is greater than me, greater than you, greater than your spouse, however wonderful he is. If he's your Boaz, he is not the answer. Your children are not the answer. Doesn't matter how wonderful they are not the answer. God is the answer. And so today, I'm going to ask you to reroute and ask God and say to yourself, what do I want God to do? What would you have God to do? God has promised us, according to Hebrews 13:5, that he will never leave us, never forsake us. But as with everything, there are requirements that we have to fulfill before we can cash in on his promises. He doesn't just lay out blanket promises without contingencies. There are conditions to his promise. And if you go back, look back in the word and see all of the promises that God has made to every single person, he said, if you will do this, I'll do this if you'll do that. So there are some things that we have to do. Even when we have come to Christ from our, as this coming to salvation, we had to make the choice. It was there, but we had to believe. Somebody said that today. Believe is simple. We just have to believe. The Word of God has an extraordinary reminder of this story. What would you have me to do? In 1 Samuel 1 and 28. And we're going to read it. 1 Samuel. And you probably know the story. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 through 28. And that's the entire chapter. I'm going to try and read it in its entirety so you can get the gist of all of it. Now there was a certain man of Ramotham Zophim of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. And he had two wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb. And let's put a pin there. The Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, When she went up to the house of the Lord, so she, she provoked her, Peninnah. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then Elkanah, her husband, then said Elkanah, her husband, to Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am not I better to thee than 10 sons? Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the afflictions of thine handmaid, and remember me, and forget not thy handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a man child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spoke now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought that she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, how long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. And they rose up early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord, and returned and came to the house of Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah. That means in the biblical way, he knew her. Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come about, after Hannah had conceived, that she bare a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked him of the Lord. We're going to stop right there for right now. And if I have time, then I'll move on. There are various things that'll cause us to be in desperate need, and we can all agree that Hannah was in desperate need. She needed an intervention. Though Elkanah loved her, uh, he couldn't help her. There was no need for her to ask Elkanah to help her with that particular need. It may appear on the surface that Hannah was all right, and many of you here appear that everything's all right. Like the young, everything's intact. The young people will say, I'm straight, I'm good, and they're toe up because they've been groomed, taught to say, I'm good, I'm straight. And so Hannah, I'm sure, doesn't say how long Peninnah and the children tormented Hannah, but for many a time, I'm sure she said, I'm good, I'm straight. Um, when we have things intact, like we're married, we have a good home, we have good children, we have a loving spouse, we have a good job, we're financially stable, we're socially accepted, we have friends. All of those things will make us think that we're good, we're straight. But sometimes there are underlying issues. Not everything is on the level. Sometimes we have secrets. The outward apparent issues that people can see or things that we cannot hide might be our relationship issues because it's but so long you can say I'm good and I'm straight and you never are seen with anybody. Then people know, no, 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 you're not so straight. You don't have relationship with people. We have body image issues. I'm not the image that society says or is looking for. I'm fluffy. And that's the word I'm going to use. I'm fluffy. And so this isn't what they are looking for when they're looking for people to take photos of. And so we have these kinds of issues that people can see. And so we have to confront those. And like me, we'll joke about it. We're not straight. We're not good. But, we have learned to deal with it. Um, we have those issues that are opposite of all of those things that I told you about. We have issues that are inside and outside our control. And a lot of those issues that we deal with here, we have a room full of people that are dealing with issues with our children, our spouse, our significant other, right here and right now. And so the question still is, what would you have God to do? And the reason I said all of those things and went through all of that is so that you can dig deep. So you just won't automatically say, I'm good, I'm straight. Because God honors what we come to Him with. Now, my son, when he was preaching one time, he said, we'll bring, and everybody knows Stella got a groove back. Well, if Angela Bassett never came to God, she can't just keep bringing Stella with Stella's issues. You can't keep bringing the character that you have become for church. You can't keep bringing that person because that person isn't getting the help that is really needed. You can't bring that one that you have set up for the outside people to see to get help. You've got to go deep and say, what is it that I really do need God to do? What will I have God to do for me? And only you can say it because I'm looking at Stella. I don't see Angela Bassett. I don't see those tears that you cry behind doors that are closed. And when we pack up from Holy Women, and if you don't lay it here, then you load it back in the car with your luggage and you ride back home wherever you came from with those same things. But today, the book can stop here. If you'll ask the question, what do I need from God? But you have to dig deep for that answer. In verse 1, verse 5 of this first Samuel, God shut up Hannah's womb. Sometimes I told you some things are outside of our control. So in verse 5, Hannah was bitter and sore. It affected the good relationship she had with her husband. He loved her. But because Hannah wasn't asking, what do I need from God? She's going along with the program. And it's affecting her physically. Her mental state had begun to affect her physical state because she had gotten to a place where she wasn't eating. Can't eat anymore. So now each one of these stages that we're going to talk about, put yourself there. What's causing your physical ailments? Is it some mental thing that is unresolved? So before you go and say what it is that you need God to do, we need to do some things. It affected her physically. She wouldn't eat, and that's in verse 7. Hannah initially allowed the taunting of Peninnah to get the best of her, so much so that physical symptoms manifested from her mental state. Her issue was underlying and had very little to do with Peninnah, nor her sons. On the outside, many of us will readily say, oh, that woman was terrible. She was doing, we don't know what Peninnah was saying. She might have just was parading her children to the temple. And every time Hannah saw it, it grieved her to see this woman has these children. Sometimes when we're hurting, we don't look within to search for the origin of the issue because it's easier to find a superficial fix outside. So we're not going to ask ourselves those serious questions or confront those serious issues when we can blame it on Sister T. As women, we have a natural tendency to try to fix everything and everybody. We take deep dives to attempt to find out what's going on with other people. Talk to me. Tell me about that, what you're going through. Tell me about that. We do this to blame others for our circumstances and pain. And if truth be told, the pain or need won't be any less when you tag a name to it. Is it going to make your pain go away? Would Hannah have been any more barren or any less barren having said Peninnah was the cause of it, of her issue? She's taunting me. But did that make her barren? Did that make her fruitful? No, it couldn't help either way to put a name to it. So it's not going to help us to label, put a tag on who caused it. It still is our pain, our trauma, our issue. We still have it. Even if, and I said this before, even if we're suffering from self inflicted wounds, we're still suffering, and the pain is still real. The scripture in 1 Corinthians 10 and 13 declares, there hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who would not suffer you to be tempted above that which ye are able, but with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. So it doesn't matter how serious and desperate our issues are, there is a way out. God has a remedy. All of us may have different ones, and if we polled the audience with how many of us, there could be as many as of us who are here, we have that many needs, that many issues, but he's the God that can handle every one of them. And at the same time, he doesn't put me in line and say, like we had to wait on Shannon today to hug. He doesn't put us in a line and say, wait until Shannon's finished. He doesn't do that. He is a God that knows how to work at the same time with every single body. And it doesn't matter how serious that need is, he spends as much time that is needed on that one and the next one. But all of us are getting help at the same time. In this lesson, Hannah had to come to this realization. In verse 8, when Elkanah reassured her, I believe that she began, and we're going to talk about a 3-point turn victory. Hannah started when the light came on, when Elkanah, and you can go back and read it, in verse 8, when he said, don't I do this for you? Don't I take care of you? Haven't I given you more portions than all the rest? He was reassuring her. Don't worry about that. So the first thing in the 3-point turn victory is assess the situation. Find out, seek for the real issue or the problem. This isn't Easy, because this will take self-reflection. And my word again, the deep dive into self. You can't just get it by saying, okay, Priscilla, what is it? And come up with the choice word, what you think will be accepted. But you have to go way deep within. Do a self reflection and resist the need to deflect. Self reflection resists the need to deflect. It's easy to blame somebody else. When I thought about, I put down here in my notes, and I don't want to take too long, but about the AA, you first have to come and say, my name is Priscilla, and I'm an alcoholic, or whatever your vice is. You have to actually acknowledge that. And that takes self reflection. Do you know how long some of people who have addictions take before they can actually say, I'm the issue? Do you know drink after drink, smoke after smoke, snort after snort, they have a name to it that's somebody else's? Because it's easier to do that. I don't have to, it's painful when I got to confront me. Um, and I'm gonna stop right here and tell you just a little bit of personal. But before I do, the last thing in that, under assess the situation, Hannah rose up from her seat of despair once she could assess and get that reassurance that I can get some help, even if I don't have it right now. I've got access to it, to some help. Um, and I'm going to be very transparent just for a little bit, early in our marriage, um, well, it wasn't that early either. Um, but I'm just going to say in our marriage, Pastor Mintz, my oldest son, was right going to college. It was his first year at Carolina, and the youngest, Justin, was made well, they're 5 years apart, so he was in high school and getting ready to graduate high school. I think the next year he would have graduated. Um, but my husband, I had gone to, and we had had a broken marriage. It was workable, but it was broken. It was one of those things where we were saying, "Oh, I'm good. We're straight." And we were going to church every Sunday, and we were doing just what people expected us to do: take care of the children, go to church, teach Sunday school, go on the youth trips. We were doing all of those things. And I was sitting in a end of the year service, and I don't know what the preacher was preaching. I don't even know. But I remember saying, I am not going another year like this, because whatever the preacher was saying, it made me do a deep dive. And I said, I am just not going. When I go home, I'm going to, and my husband was sitting there. He was sitting with me. Oh, we wasn't disjointed in that, just looking at us. We were together. We were Bonnie and Clyde, um, looking at us. We had the same goals and aspirations according to what you thought and what you saw. And so when I got home, I said to him, I said, I don't want to go another year as things are. I said, we are broken and we need to do some things different. And he said to me, I don't want anything different. He said, so I'm just going to leave. Now, this is New Year's Day. And I said to God what I wanted. I said, Lord, I need something different. And this is what he told me to do: to say to your husband, talk to him and tell him that you don't want to go as things are going. And that is what I did. What God didn't tell me was what I was going to do when he said what he said. And so he didn't give me those instructions. And so when he said that to me, he said, I'll just go. We packed his clothes together. We put them in a duffel bag, what he was going to take, and I remember a basket. And he went and he left. And in that time, I had to do some diving. I had scuba gear. It was so deep. I mean, I had to go way deep. And I remember saying to God, I didn't tell Diane, I didn't tell my dad, I didn't say anything to anyone at my job, my closest friends. I said, if I say something to anybody, my brothers who I'm very close with, I said, if I say something, then if when the Lord does what he's going to do with us, they're going to have some type of feeling about my husband. And so the best thing for me to do is not to say anything to them to tank, because they had a good relationship with him. And so I said, I'm not going to do that. And so every day I remember telling Diane after it was over, and she was saying, I didn't know that. No, I didn't tell anybody. We came to church. When the boys were home, they were at church with us. He would come to church um, and sit with me in church. And I was asking God, I never said, I need you to change him. He said, he don't want to change him. I need you to do this. I said, Lord, show me myself. Show me myself was my prayer. Show me myself. And within 8 months, 8 months had passed, and he was still gone, and I'm still praying. Show me how much more is going to be revealed here. But he was showing me myself because before I could go and say, what do I want God to do? I had to actually confront me. And so I said, show me myself. And he did. And when it was 8 months later, Willie called and said, I think I'm coming on back home. And I said, okay. And he came back home. And that was when Pastor Mintz was first going to college. He's now 41. And we are good, really, really good. Not just we straight. Not just we straight. As a matter of fact, not just going through motions. I'm not having to say to him what I think he wants to hear. He's not, by no means are we just in total agreement with everything, because he's still a human, a male human, and I'm still a female human. And so we're different. So we are not going to agree about everything, but we are really good. Praise God. After all of these years. But I'm telling you, if I'm going to say what I need God from, he needs me to be honest about what I do need from him. And I need God, you need to see you. Yes. You need to see you. It's not everybody else. It wasn't Penina. It was Hannah. And so when Hannah came to that, the next thing to the 3-point turn is ask the real question to the one that can help. Ask the real question to the one that can help. Hannah had to form those words as if you have to say, Lord, stop my tongue from lying. Lord, I need you to stop my tongue from lying. If that's the real thing that you need God to do, then say that, because he needs you to form it with your mouth to say what it is. You don't need to elude it to God. It doesn't need to be implied. It needs to be formed by your lips and spoken out of your mouth. She was specific. Hannah said, she didn't say, I want a child. She said, Lord, I want a man child. She was specific. So when we're asking, say specific things. If you need $10, say, Lord, I need $10. $50 over here is what they said. But we need you to be specific. Say what you need God to do. He's not a God that lives in a shoe and just has meager resources. He's not a resource. He's a source. Yes. Yes. He's the source where all the resources come from. So he needs you to ask him real questions. Be specific. She had to make the decision for herself and ask what she wanted to do. Don't you think if Elkanah, how he loved her, that he wasn't praying, saying, Lord, help my wife to have a baby. We want a baby. I'm sure he was. He loved her, his wife, but Hannah had to say it. Hannah had to get serious and take that inward look. It's not about this lady with all these other children. It's about me. I want one. Make the adjustment. So what she did, she started praying. That's the first thing. We go to God in prayer. That's communication with God. And you know what? The communication with God is not one-sided. When he speaks to us, we need to wait on when we speak to him, we need to wait on him to respond. If you're just having conversation with someone and they never talk, they never have any feedback, you're looking to see if they fell asleep or if they, something is wrong with am I stuttering or they're not understanding? So you want to make sure you want to get response. So get the response from God before you start doing anything. This is the adjustment. Praying is the first move of the adjustment. 1 Samuel 1:10 through 11. And she was bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid and remember me. And she was specific. She said, remember my affliction. She wasn't trying to sidestep him and say, I'm good. I'm all right. No, I got an affliction. No, I've got an issue that I need you to deal with. And remember me and forget not thy handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a child. Then I will give unto the Lord a man child, and there shall no razor come upon his head. The next thing you want to do after you pray, realign with the purpose of God. Shift yourself. If he told you something to do, realign yourself with the word. Stop comparing yourself. If you're a Hannah, stop looking at Penina. Realign yourself. God has already put us in right relationship with him through his spirit. Our one job, according to James 1:27, is to keep ourselves unspotted from the world. And we do that through prayer, constant prayer. Don't be distracted by those that don't understand. Eli was the priest. He didn't understand what she was doing. Hannah told us that today. Your pastor not the discerning police for you. So don't be discouraged by what other people are saying and what they don't understand. Remain confident. Verse 15 and 17. What did she say in 15 through 17? And Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord. That's when she told Eli. She said, oh, no, I'm not drunk. No, don't get it twisted. I know what I'm doing. I'm praying to my God and I'm waiting on him to respond. Remain confident. And then when you do that in verse 24 through 28, and we won't go back and read it, keep your word. Hannah brought Samuel when she had him, when he was weaned, she didn't go back on her word. I didn't go resort back to those old things that I was doing when my husband came back home, because that's what drove him away from the beginning. Not all of that was it, but I contributed to it. So you can't go revert back when God does what he says he's going to do. When you realign yourself, stay aligned. Stay aligned. As I go to my seat, I'll ask you to assess what the real need is in your life. Ask the real question: what will you have God to do for you? And then finally, make the necessary adjustments to realign yourself to the purpose and the will of God, not for the church, not for your family, but the will of God for you, for your life. That's all I have. That's all I have.